Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had the chance to stretch your legs and check out our virtual exhibit booth. Our first panel of the day is viewed from the Dais, Local Leaders Advancing Climate Resiliency. We'll hear from our Southeast Florida mayors about how they've been seizing the moment together for over a decade. The panel will be moderated by Carl Emrit with the District of Columbia Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, where he manages the Threat Assessment Center. Carl has deep roots in Palm Beach County, having completed internships with Florida's 21st U.S. Congressional District, the Palm Beach County League of Cities, and the City of West Palm Beach. Remember to please type your questions in the Q&A window, and we'll try to answer as many as possible later on in the session. Thank you so much, Carl, for moderating today.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Megan, and the opportunity to participate in the 13th Annual Climate Leadership Summit. As Megan had mentioned, my name is Carl Amrant, and I currently serve as a program analyst for the District of Columbia's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, where we are tasked with the planning and coordination of Homeland Security and emergency management efforts to ensure the safety and security of our nation's capital, but also for the people who visit and live there. Also importantly, my agency leads the Resilient DC initiative, which is an effort to build DC's resilience to both catastrophic shocks and chronic stressors to ensure that DC is able to thrive in the face of climate change. For these reasons, I'm incredibly honored to moderate the panel and excited to introduce our panelists. First, we are joined by Mayor Robert Weinroth of Palm Beach County. Alongside the mayor, we are joined by Commissioner Steve Geller of Broward County, Mayor Danielle Levine Cava of Miami-Dade County, and last but not least, Mayor David Rice of Monroe County. Thank you all for being here today and agreeing to speak on this very important topic. First, we'll start with Mayor Levine Cava. There's been a lot of talk recently about 2030 as being an important target for major greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. Pursuant to this goal, where do you see the compact in your county in 10 years?
Thank you so very much for having me on the panel, and thank you so much for your facilitation. We are on track here in Miami-Dade County to cut our greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030 compared to our 2019 levels, thanks to the climate action strategy that we launched in October, just before I headed to the UN Climate Conference in Glasgow, COP26. We've been planning for more than 12 years. We have the longstanding partnership within the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact, and that will result in impressive greenhouse gas emission reductions for all 4 of our member counties. That includes, of course, Broward, Palm Beach, Monroe, and Miami-Dade. The climate action strategy that we launched will take us to 50% reduction by 2030 and all the way to net zero by 2050, which aligns with ICLEI, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change commitment that was made back in August, Race to Zero. So we're working together with local municipalities and government entities all around the world to achieve that goal. And it's all about teamwork. We are working with hundreds of partners across the government sector, the private sector, businesses of all sizes, academic institutions and nonprofits and everything in between to get there.
Absolutely. Thank you for your leadership, Mayor Levine Cava, and just teamwork, underscoring the importance of that to develop and execute a plan. Commissioner Geller, we have a large student population in attendance this year, and we are ending day 1 of the summit with a youth panel. What message do you want to share with our young people on what your county is doing for future generations?
Thank you. And before I address that, I just want to say, when you notice everyone else is a mayor and I'm a commissioner, it's because when this was scheduled, I was mayor until 3 weeks ago. So that's why it's the others. And but I've worked closely, Mayor Levine Cava and I have known each other for a long time. When I became chair of the South Florida Regional Planning Council, it was because she resigned to become the county commissioner. And Commissioner Weinroth and I have known each other for years as well. So I'm pleased to be here today on this panel with my colleagues. But back to your question, Carl, I think that the big issue that we need to recognize is that everything that we're doing, our approach in general, is to ensure that younger people have the same or better opportunities as earlier generations. And a lot of times we're seeing that that's not the case. And those of us who have been in office for a long time need to do more to ensure that we give the opportunities to our younger generation, that we don't hand them a environment that has been irreparably damaged. We really aren't doing enough. When I say we, I mean government, business, society as a whole. We are not doing enough, but I think we are, at least on the government level, at least here in South Florida, all working to make positive headway. Let me give you some examples. Speaking now just for Broward, but we've worked with the Broward County School District to establish a resiliency curriculum. We jointly celebrate the annual Broward Youth Climate Summit, where last year we had about 4,000 attendees. Also, I know in my district, every year we have the annual Broward County Water Days, a countywide function, where we're teaching the importance of water, but also we give out, trees, plants for all of these other important environmental issues. In terms of our Broward landscape, we're building resilience into all of our investments. And you don't want to say everything right now. I know there'll be more questions. We are working on resilience in all of our things. Let me try and close on the question, I think, was, what do we want to share with young people? And let me share with young people, I think, some important issues. Number one, education really is a huge issue. And when I say education, I'm not just talking about to students. We as elected officials, and I know that the three of us have been trying, but we need to better educate our constituents on these extremely complicated issues. Sea level rise, effect on buildings, effect on homeowners insurance, conservation, resilience being cheaper, or the effect on our well fields, Everglades, Lake Okeechobee. We need to better teach people about these complicated issues. And here's the biggest issue that young people need to understand. You cannot sit on the sidelines. You need to get involved politically, but you also need to be realistic about it. Some people are saying, and I'm saying this because I know a lot of young people vote in far lower numbers than older citizens, and that's wrong because they have a lot more to worry about for a lot longer period of time. A lot of people have said that all of the candidates are alike, so young people don't want to get involved in politics. People that say that will get what they deserve, but the country doesn't deserve it. This planet doesn't deserve it. We need to have young people, work more, pay attention to what the candidates' stances are, what their records are on environmental issues. You need to be realistic. Don't just vote for whoever promises the most, because sometimes they'll promise things that aren't realistic. But we need to understand, we need to teach young people, and as elected officials, we need to teach our constituents that doing these things is not going to be cheap. All of my constituents, and I'm willing to bet that Mayor Levine-Cava's and Mayor Weinroth's constituents feel the same way. They want more services and lower taxes. And that can't happen unless the services fairy comes along and waves his or her magic wand. So you need to tell people. We need to stress to our students in particular, but also to our constituents. These are important issues. They're going to require pay-fors, and nothing is for free. And if you want students, if you want to make a real change, the best way you can do that is get involved in politics, vote for whichever candidate. I'm not telling you which candidate or which party, but examine the records of the candidates and listen to what they say they're going to do and look at what they've actually done. And that should affect your voting. You must get involved. That's a long answer to a short question, but.
Well said, Commissioner. I think the crux of it, civic engagement. Be civically involved in your community. For our other elected officials on the panel, do you have anything else you'd like to share for our young attendees in the audience?
I think Commissioner Geller really touched upon most of the points that I would. And I think, again, it's important that the people who are out there right now watching this recognize that this is going to be handed to them. We're trying to do the best we can from our current perspective, but this is going to be an ongoing issue that's going to be for generations to come to save the planet from what's already occurred.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Levine Cava.
Yes, I want to add that we have so many young people engaged actively. For example, in Miami-Dade County, we have the Clio Institute that is doing so much to help support next gen leaders. Their voices are critical, and they push those of us who contributed so much to this problem to do more. So it is so very important that we not only listen to them, but that we do everything we can to support their active involvement. And that includes bringing them to conferences like this, going to their conferences, so every chance we can. Plus, they give us a sense of purpose and hope for the future.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Rice, anything else to add?
Well, the only thing I can say is the same advice we would give to any generation. Face the rest of your life with flexibility and a willingness to learn, and hopefully a willingness to be involved, because as those of us you see on the screen fade out, we have to be replaced by hopefully dedicated, knowledgeable people. And that doesn't happen overnight. So I would encourage younger folks to be involved in their communities, and the emphasis that Commissioner Geller made on education cannot be overemphasized.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll say for the young people in the audience, as someone who is civically engaged in Palm Beach County in middle school and high school and serving on youth delegations for my city, I think here is a great representation of elected leaders that are willing to open that door for the young people in attendance, but also within their jurisdictions. And so my charge to the young people that are on today's call, reach out to your elected officials here today, engage with your peers and ask, how can I be involved to support and address climate change in my community? Moving on to Mayor Rice, the consequences of climate change are already being felt. What are the main resilience issues facing your county right now? And what actions are you taking right now with those consequences of climate change?
Well, thank you for having us here today. I'd like to frame things a little bit. I'm looking at my three compatriots and have to emphasize that we're the little guy on the block. Monroe County, I'm sure most people know, but we're a string of islands, approximately 120 miles long, and on the average, about half a mile wide, perhaps, connected by bridges. We're very low. We have had problems for some time. Actually, in 2015, we completed our first vulnerability assessment to identify sections of roads and areas that we would expect flooding in the future. We have in Monroe County, which doesn't seem like much compared to the other folks, but we have 311 miles of county roads. And our evaluations at this time suggest that about half of them could be underwater by 2045. Now, one of the issues that I think we all face, and Commissioner Geller mentioned it as he was speaking, is funding, money. I've been told that money and engineering can solve most any problem. And I do somewhat believe that. But we're talking about a significant amount of money. In Monroe County, we're a population of roughly 80,000 people. I would guess, and we have figures to support this, which of course at this time are estimates, by 2045, we're looking at probably $2 billion for our road system, as much as $5 billion overall if we add in our other infrastructure. That's going to be a very difficult thing to accomplish. We, of course, started early in Monroe County because our problems started earlier. We have neighborhoods in our county that has water anywhere from a few inches to a foot or 2 feet on their streets, anywhere from a few days to 90 days out of the year. That's not the way anybody would choose to live. So we're involved in a lot of activities evaluating our sea levels in comparison to our land elevation. We have done mobile LiDAR studies to be able to identify where our problems will begin. And we estimate where they will progress over a period of time. When we look at elevating roads, which is one of our major issues, we have to think about how much should we elevate them, because the cost, of course, is directly proportional to the height. We did make a decision, and that decision is the average road lasts about 25 years. So we're elevating to a height that we think will keep us out of the water by, let's say, 2045. About that time, we'll need to replace that road, and we are planning to have a foundation that will accommodate adding fill and continuing to elevate as needed at that time. Those decisions, of course, will be made by others in virtually every case that I see here, because these decision makers won't be the people making decisions in 2045. That's another message to our younger folks. Our non-road infrastructure, of course, is a major issue. We look at about $3.5 billion needed to elevate approximately 5,000 homes, flood-proofing about 1,000 commercial structures. US 1 will need shoreline stabilization, and we estimate 6 areas. So we're really looking at an expenditure of about $5 billion over the next 25 years. 80,000 people can't write that check. We're going to need assistance from the state, the federal government. Over the past 20 years, we have provided wastewater, central wastewater, for the entirety of the Keys. And we raised about $1 billion to do that with the help of outside partners. We're really going to have to approach this task in the same fashion. For us, with the population, that's a staggering figure.
Absolutely. That's a big dollar sign. I'm going to move to Mayor Levine Cava, who has some insight to contribute here.
Well, I want to be clear that we are all counting on this new infrastructure bill. And I am speaking to you from Washington, D.C. I've already been meeting with White House officials and other members of the cabinet, other secretaries and assistant secretaries, to talk about our transportation issues, our resilience issues, our water and sewer, wastewater, septic to sewer, all of those issues that are so critical to handling our climate change. So we have projects in line that we're pitching. There's formula dollars coming to the states. There are discretionary grants that are some of them still to be developed, the guidelines, but clearly the president has said the priorities are equity and resilience in all of this funding. So from a resilience perspective, we definitely need to work together as a region. So just a couple of days ago, the state of Florida Department of Environmental Protection released recommendations for some resilience grants across the state. And we need to get together with our cities and with our sister counties and see how we can maximize the impact of those investments. And so, you know, we have, and I didn't get to mention before, some of the key implementation areas for us are focusing on energy and buildings, because we know buildings are top number 2 in producing carbon. So we have very aggressive programs working with buildings around reducing their carbon footprints. As far as land use and transportation, clearly we have our procurement of electric vehicles, our electric charging infrastructure, expanding, protecting green and blue spaces. All of these things are priorities within the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. For water and waste, we've clearly got to convert our waste to energy, and there are more creative ways to do that, and reduce waste overall and cutting water use. And finally, all of this creates good jobs. So a green economy is one that is good for our workforce, and we need to think equitably how we're going to make sure that there's a pipeline for people in our communities to get access to these good job opportunities. So it's a win-win-win strategy of building the resilience that we need for the future, creating good jobs, growing the economy. And that's the overall strategy.
Thank you for sharing that, Mayor Levine Cava, and underscoring the importance of it's not only your county, but it's the state and federal government through this new infrastructure package that's going to be paramount to execute on a lot of the mitigation measures to make greener economy and fight back climate change. I wanted to press a little bit further for our other panelists regarding what type of innovative tools are you implementing or projects to advance climate change. Mayor Levine Cava mentioned purchasing EVs, electric vehicles. Commissioner Geller, do you have anything else to share?
Yeah, we also, we have currently in the middle of a pilot program where we purchased a large number of electric buses, and we're to see for a full year whether or not they're going to survive the South Florida heat, which we think that they will, and we're hope that that's going to occur. I recently passed a groundbreaking transit-oriented development program where we are going, that's partially for affordable housing, partially for environmental reasons, where we're trying to now direct growth to our major transportation corridors, where we are permitting, without any county approvals, cities to put residential on top of or as part of their existing commercial. In Dade County, you could see like at Dadeland or at Aventura Mall or any of these large places which are on transit corridors, the cities would be able to put a large amount of residential housing in the existing commercial. By doing that, it's all transit oriented because of the buses. You'd be having people living and working and shopping in the same locations, so they don't have to get in their cars and drive places. They can walk. There's all sorts of benefits there. We need to do more. We've done some in terms of the sewer to septic, where we have in our more rural areas, we have passed rules that if they are going to be within I think it's 200 feet of a sewer line that they will be required to connect anytime they do any construction there. The sewer to septic is a huge issue that the state is very intimately aware of, but there's never enough funding. It's costing roughly $20,000 to connect to sewer lines if they're in place. And there's just right now a huge problem with that. And the county's been working on it, but not doing enough. We really need state and federal funds. But one of the reasons that we've had a lot of the algae blooms and things like that is because of the existence of septic tanks. There's a lot else that the county's doing, but I'll save that for later questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I also just want to acknowledge we have a lot of great questions coming in through. So for speakers, I want to make sure that we go to you, Mayor Rice, Mayor Weinrock, to share any main resilience issues and kind of strategies or tactics that you're deploying to address that. If you could be brief with your remarks, and we'll move to some of the questions that are coming in. So we'll start with you, Mayor Weinrock, please.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what's already been said, but certainly we have a real opportunity. In the shadow of the pandemic, the kind of money that's going to be coming down from the federal government is akin to what was after World War II with the WPA. So we're going to have a lot of opportunity now to take care of the infrastructure. And so resiliency, sustainability are going to be part of what we're doing in these construction projects, ensuring that the capital construction includes resiliency, sustainability principles as we plan them out. And like Commissioner was saying from Broward, we really have an opportunity with EVs right now. Electric vehicles, electric buses are going to be another opportunity for reducing carbon emissions. And overall, I think we're all going to be challenged with this opportunity of how we're going to spend this money coming from the federal government. Was the $1 trillion that's already been approved, or the $3 trillion that can come down the pike when they finally agree to what's going to go on? And like Commissioner Geller said, we have an opportunity to take that money, use it for new infrastructure, use it in the new urbanized corridors, especially Palm Beach County. We're sort of trailing behind Miami-Dade and Broward as far as our intensive building along the water. But this is a way also of being more resilient, of getting rid of urban sprawl, putting people closer together, having people in places where they don't need to be getting in the car to get to where they need to be. I just myself moved into the downtown of Boca Raton, and I love the idea of just being able to get out there and enjoy the cityscape. And we need to have mobility. We need people to be able to give up their private vehicles, use public transportation. All of this combines to make us more resilient.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Rice, anything else to add?
Well, there are a few things that we're doing, and I'll be very specific and brief. We're identifying areas of extremely high hazard. We're purchasing homes that are in those areas, in many cases destroying them, converting them to natural space, and we have found that to be a process that depends on willing sellers, and so it's been a bit slower than we would like. Not every homeowner who's had repetitive flood claims is willing to sell. I think we're going to have to wrestle with that issue in the future, because some folks just aren't going to be willing to do that. But I believe that we really need to resolve those issues for those repetitive claim areas, and we have that underway. Our vulnerability is extreme because, well, basically the entire county is beneath the floodplain. So I've referred to it in previous years, we are the canary in the coal mine. I believe I used that quote in this very same conference in past years. We remain so. We are further out there than many other areas because we are so vulnerable.
Thank you, Mayor.
Um,
If we can be brief remarks, I want to get to our questions. I want to go to you, Commissioner, then I'll go to Mayor Levine Cava to wrap us up on this question. Commissioner, go ahead.
I was going to be discussing all of the resilience things that Broward has done later. If this is the correct time, should I be doing it now?
Yeah, if you want to share really briefly kind of the resilience accomplishments and work that you're doing today.
Broward, and I don't know if everybody knows Dr. Jennifer Gerardo, but we in Broward consider ourselves fortunate to have her. We think she's like a #1 in water expertise. We've done a huge amount of things here. First of all, I authored an ordinance. We have required on all of our intertidal waterways and everything off of the intracoastal, we are requiring the seawalls be raised. Now, a lot of people aren't going to like it when they do that because in some cases they'll have to be raised so high they're going to block their view of the water, but their choice is either doing that or they'll be flooded. And in order to accomplish that legally, even on existing buildings, we've had to rely on the ancient common law trespass of water concept going back to England. So we are now, even on existing buildings, making them increase the height of their seawalls. We've required higher finished floor elevations. We've done a countywide resilience plan, drainage requirements. If you look at the current map versus the future floodplain map, you'll see that a lot of the existing buildings are going to be underwater. So we're requiring higher construction standards. We're looking at building a new joint city-county government center. We're paying, if it proceeds, about $100 million more to both elevate it and to make sure that it is LEED Platinum, that it will be net zero, because we think the government needs to set an example for all of the private sector. So we're prepared to pay a whole lot more to do that. But we've dealt with our groundwater table rise, storm surge. We may not have the money to fix everything, and I hope at some point in time we're going to have a question about the funding because I want to discuss that. But I think that Broward at least has identified the issues, and I'll put up what we have done up against just about any county in the country in terms of actively taking steps.
Thank you for sharing that, Commissioner. Mayor Levine Cava, for a brief remark, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, well, I agree that Broward is definitely doing wonderful things, and we're on parallel tracks. Thank you. And we do learn from each other through this compact, which has been so very valuable to all of us. So I mentioned a few of the things already. We're certainly aggressively pursuing solar on all county infrastructure, shore power at our port. We have the Building Efficiency 305 challenge to cut water and energy use by 20% by the year 2026 for commercial property. We've appointed the first ever in the world chief heat officer, and a few other places have now added to make sure that we're protecting from extreme heat, which actually is a larger cause of death than any other natural disaster in the world. White roofs and parking areas to reduce urban heat islands, 75 electric buses procured. We have a 30% by 2030 tree canopy goal as part of our Cities for Forests pledge. Our downtown county garages now have, through public-private collaboration, EV charging stations, and we're aggressively expanding that. Smart trails for greater bicycle mobility. The underlying proceeding will be a great amenity. Others, the Ludlam Trail, we did the groundbreaking. I invite all of you to look out for our Aspen Ideas Climate 2022, which will be in Miami Beach in March, which will bring world thought leaders to look at these. It's sort of like an Art Basel of climate. And, some of the really hard questions that are being asked from the public, what about exit strategies? What about major public education? What about funding streams to finance these things? I'll just end on one important note I learned in Glasgow, that to the extent that we are aggressively pursuing all of these policies, being transparent with our bond investors, we will continue to have investors because we are doing the necessary steps to protect our future.
Thank you, Mayor Levine Cava. And for our audience, I hope this question and remarks serves as an indicator of all the great work that's happening in these counties that may not be necessarily visible, but that's happening right in your backyard. I want to get to a question on the economy and housing. Mayor Levine Cava, you had mentioned the green economy. We had a question come in from Ronaldo Martinez. How does Miami-Dade County plan on expanding sustainability and resilience job markets? And I would say I think there's another slash in there around workforce readiness programs, ensuring that your constituents have the skills to move into those jobs.
Yes,
I'll turn to you and then open the floor to the rest of our panelists.
Yeah, well, we have put in a very ambitious and exciting program plan to the Department of Commerce for American Rescue Act funding to really fuel a blue-green economy that includes access to capital and pipeline development. We're also working with our job training entities to make sure that these jobs that come forward through infrastructure and technology tap our local talent. There's a wonderful REDI scorecard, REDI scorecard.org, that was just put out by a local nonprofit that looks at readiness around resilience and equity. So, we're joining forces. We're making it a primary focus of our work as we lure and new businesses and help grow businesses to make sure that it's situated in our own talent development and talent retention. So those programs are under development and we welcome any ideas.
That's excellent. Thank you, Mayor Levine Cava. For our rest of our panelists, anything else to share on the green economy and building your job workforce in your counties?
Well, I would like to comment on the workforce issue since it's really extremely critical in Monroe County. And because we are a string of islands, we have to rely for a great deal on workers from outside our county. Due to the graceful decisions that have been made in the past by Dade County, they have assisted us with a public bus system that transports workers into Monroe County multiple times per day. And for that, I can't say how thankful we are, because Monroe County has never excelled in public transportation. We're spending a great deal of time right now planning for the future, because we know that the future economy of Monroe County will, to a large part, rest on our ability to transport workers into the county. One of the side effects of COVID has been an extreme increase in the cost of housing in Monroe County, which was already high. It has really caught on fire. Every time we see those increases, the cost of living here and housing a workforce increases as well. We have built virtually all of the affordable housing that we can in Monroe County, because as an area of state critical concern, we are only allowed to build both market rate and workforce housing to a certain level, and we're about there. We will not be increasing our workforce housing substantially in the future. Transportation is the essential core. So we're placing a lot of emphasis there at this present time. And without Dade County's decisions, we would be in far more trouble than we are today.
Thank you, Mayor Rice. That's helpful, just underscoring the role that the compact plays in having a cross-county, interstate, inter-county development. Commissioner Geller, I know you have a question, then I want to go to Commissioner Weinroth around affordable housing.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of the economic part of this, I'm not even going to talk about Broward County particularly. What we have to do nationally, a lot of people are saying we need to stay with coal, we need to stay with oil because of jobs that they create. And they are well-paid jobs, but we've got to get over the idea that those are the only well-paid jobs. We need to be explaining nationally that the jobs that are being created by this new technology are going to be the same and more and better, as well as cleaner, with all of the jobs in wind, solar, in all of these other positions. You can't just look at the existing jobs and say we're losing these well-paid jobs without realizing that we're gaining more. And the last thing I want to say on that is I really hope you're going to talk about financing, because I'm desperate to talk about the CNSF restudy.
I'm going to come right back to you, Commissioner. Thank you. Mayor Weinroth, we had a question for you specifically around workforce housing being an equity concern. Can you share how Palm Beach County is addressing that?
Yeah, it's important to understand that even before the pandemic, we realized that workforce housing, affordable housing is a key issue for us. And with housing prices now going over 30% more than they were a year ago, post-pandemic, with the New Yorkers and the Northeasterners waking up to the fact that this is the paradise where they want to live, it's very difficult for our residents here to compete. But from an economic point of view, if companies can't find employees who can live in the county, and it's the whole South Florida, Broward, Miami-Dade, even Monroe, I'm sure you're seeing the same pressures that we're seeing up here. So we are working with the developers as we're still building out. We still have space here. We're making sure that we're setting aside up to 25% for workforce housing, and workforce housing, which has a bad rep because people think of this as something that's going to have some undesirable element in their community. We stress the fact these are school teachers, these are policemen, these are healthcare workers, these are the neighbors that they are going to every day. And it's important that if we're going to have a vibrant economy, that we are taking care of the housing issues. And it goes also to transportation. If we don't have an affordable, vibrant public transportation system, both within the urban areas and outside of those cores, then we're not going to be able to attract the workers we need. And that's going to be deteriorating as far as the ability to get the workers we need here. And the companies are going to go elsewhere.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to circle back to the question around funding and financing. And Mayor Levine-Cava had mentioned the infrastructure package. Many of you have mentioned how your counties are committing funding to municipalities to support these efforts. Commissioner Geller, maybe you could take us there. Can you explain at the county level, what are you doing to finance these projects to make sure that they're a reality for your communities?
Well, first of all, in terms of the infrastructure, Broward County has recently, 2 years ago, or maybe it's 3 now, passed a penny sales tax specifically for infrastructure, for transit, so that we can deal with a lot of these issues. We're hoping this will help with electrification. We know it will. We're putting in fiber optics to reduce the amount of time waiting at traffic lights. We're doing a lot of things to reduce traffic, and again, have substantially added and are upgrading our bus fleet so that we using this money so that we can do that. We also, with the federal money, we now have the surtax as the necessary match. So we believe we'll be able to bring back a lot of federal money. But when you're talking about federal money, one thing I don't think most realize, and maybe I will sound like Chicken Little here, but I am afraid that Dade and Broward and parts of Palm Beach, were carved out of the Everglades and are about to be returning to the Everglades fairly soon if we don't get something called the Central and South Florida restudy accomplished. Remember, we live in a subtropical atmosphere with a lot of rain. So the way that we have historically dealt with this is our canals flow out to the ocean, and that's our drainage system that keeps us from flooding every time we have heavy rainfall. Well, that works okay, providing that the inland water is higher than the ocean water. But that's really not the case any longer. We have a lot of our flood barriers where even today in high tide, they're overtopping the flood control structures, meaning that instead of draining fresh water to the ocean, you're draining in salt water from the ocean, making it even worse. So according to our best possible estimates from the Corps of Engineers, it'll be, if everything works properly, it'll be 15 years before they are able to fix like 20% of the flood structures. And according to the data we're getting, in another 7 to 12 years, on a regular basis, in heavy rain, we're no longer going to be able to drain South Florida. I mean, so I'm telling people, lock your dogs up because you will, on a regular basis, be having alligators on your lawn. I'm glad you're living in your houses. Sell houses, buy arcs, because you're going to need an arc to, survive here. And, get rid of your cars and just get flat bottom boats. This is a slight exaggeration, but only a slight exaggeration. If we're not able to bring down more federal funds to get the Central and South Florida restudy and the fixes accomplished, all of South Florida is going to be underwater in heavy rain because we will no longer be able to drain. And everybody that I ask about this, all of the experts, they say, well, yeah, you're right. And I say, well, what is the solution? Well, there really isn't any, but we're working on it. Working on it when you're saying that it's going to happen is not really a good answer. But okay.
No, thank you, Commissioner.
I'm
That's well
ranting.
said. I think that's a really important caricature of like how dire the circumstance can be if we don't have that investment. I want to turn to Mayor Levine Cava. I know you have to run here. If you had any parting thoughts on the question around financing climate resilience.
Yes, well, we are all grateful for this federal money and working out what we will be eligible for and how to aggressively pursue it. And our collaboration should help us. We've been making that point. But beyond that, people want to live here. We are still a Mecca. And so we have to find ways to direct some of the growth dollars to the hardening, the resilience that will preserve the assets. And we need to persuade the markets and investors that we have a plan so that they will continue to invest here as well. So Miami Beach had a bond program that they're using. We're going to have to look at creative financing into the future for some of the heavier lifts. But in the meantime, we just need to be smarter about how we build and aggressive about the requirements. And, a lot of private developers are taking the necessary steps themselves, adding the pumps. But we also need to, as I say, build smarter. We need to have more retention water areas, elevations, and all of that. So we're working together as a region to accomplish it. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to avoid the arcs in the near future.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor Rice, Mayor Weinroth, anything else to add?
No, I think, thankfully, the issues that are being seen down below us in Monroe Miami-Dade and Broward haven't really taken effect up here. We have higher levels for building that we've already started instituting. And I think, like Commissioner Geller said, we need to be making our infrastructure able to deal with the sea level rise, because obviously water going out is not going to happen if the water is higher in the ocean than it is on the on the peninsula. So we have a lot of work to do, but like I said before, we're very fortunate. What the pandemic has done is given us this tremendous spurt of federal assistance, and I think what we're going to be able to do with this money for the infrastructure is going to be something that is going to be for the benefit of the coming generations. And I think we're fortunate in that regard.
And I would say that if we take a historical look at Monroe County, 60 years ago, we were building our homes on ground level. Today, with the help of our hurricanes, which we all share, unfortunately, many of those structures have been destroyed. They've been replaced with homes that are much more resilient, built down here on stilts typically. That elevation is vitally important. And our big issue at this point is trying to keep dry roads to keep people able to drive home. Now, we've got a lot of policy decisions to make, because once we get into the private area, as an area of critical state concern, we're highly restricted at the present time on our building possibilities. And we're going to have to look at some changes that will allow those elevated seawalls, will allow perhaps filling of private property. We can elevate roads, but that water is going to go somewhere, and we don't have to be terribly bright to figure out it's going to end up on private property. So we have many adjustments to make over upcoming years, and we'll be starting a major portion of that project early this next year, looking at some very important decisions on how we raise funds to accomplish those tasks.
Carl,
Thank you, Mayor Rice.
one quick thing.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Okay, Mayor Rice said an important thing when he mentioned hurricanes. A lot of people are complaining about, well, we can't afford this or we can't afford that to protect the environment because it'll be another $500 a year or $1,000 a year. If you look at your homeowner's insurance bills, those are going up $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 a year from what they were 5 or 7 years ago, and they're continuing to rise. And so it's one of the pay me now or pay me later. They're not understanding that the reason that their insurance bills are going up, one of the big reasons is because of climate change, because of that all of the both more rain, heavier wind, and more flooding. And people need to understand that if we're taking that money, if you're not going to put it into fighting climate change, expect to pay it in insurance bills.
Absolutely.
Very
Well
good
said.
point.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have to wrap in a minute here, but I wanted to say to our audience members, we've had a lot of great questions for our panelists, and I'll say, while we couldn't get to every question that was proposed during this panel, I wanted to assure our audience that your questions have been shared with our panelists in the chat box, and so they have visibility on it. They're hearing your issues and concerns, and it's on their radar. So thank you so much for our audience for your engagement and attention in today's discussion. To close out today's panel, I wanted to turn back to our panelists to see if there's any closing comments that you have before we head into break. I'll say too, in your closing remarks, we had a few questions regarding moving away from seawall infrastructure to more climate and resilient solutions, and natural solutions as well. So as well as we had a question around your plans to mitigate the effects of extreme heat. In your closing remarks, if there's anything you can address along those lines, we'd appreciate that as well. So we'll first start, let's go back to Commissioner Geller.
Just in reference to the seawall, what we've mandated is that you have to protect the area. Now, this can be done by a seawall. It can be done by berms. I said seawalls because that's how most people are going to do it, because if you're on the coast, if you're on the intracoastal, if you're on an intratidal waterway, and depending on how much property you have, sometimes you may have to use the seawall, but it can also be, as I said, berms, it can be other natural solutions, but we recognize, and this is critical, we are recognizing that we have to do something to block the salt water from flooding because it's coming. Anybody who doesn't believe that sea level rise is actually occurring lives in Arizona.
If I could make a quick comment.
Go ahead, Mayor Rice, closing comment, please.
Yes, please. We have a pretty unique problem because seawalls aren't going to work. Our ground is ancient coral, and as such, it's permeable by water. You can put up all the seawalls or dikes as they do in the Netherlands, and the water will come up on the other side of it. We have some restrictions.
Mayor Weinroth.
Well, I'm going to say that Palm Beach County is certainly cognizant of this. We're a leader in living shoreline projects. These green infrastructure projects along our coast protect seawalls against wave energy and storm surge, protect natural shorelines from erosion, all the while providing habitats for birds, oysters, and fish. So, the other parts of the country are worried about the fact that they don't have water. Thankfully, we do have plenty of rainwater here. We have to be able to work with the natural resources we have here, and again, improve our infrastructure to be able to address the sea level rise, address the increased heat that we're seeing now. This is going to be part of the construction code changes that are going to go on, requiring lead projects to go forward. And again, EV vehicles, reducing our carbon footprint, all of this goes towards hopefully making this a better place for our children and our grandchildren.
Mayor Weinroth, Mayor Rice, and Commissioner Geller, thank you so much for your engagement and participation in today's discussion. There's so much we could cover in this short period of time, and so I just wanted to thank you for sharing the great lengths that your counties have done. And I'll just circle back to one point earlier in the discussion, not only for young people, but for our attendees. Find out how you can be civically engaged in your community and engage in your climate resilience efforts within your counties. And you can start with that by engaging in this conference and reaching out to your commissioners, because certainly it's a community and whole of society effort to fight back climate change. And I think our leadership here on this panel demonstrates that. So I encourage you all to figure out how you can enact change in your own community.
And your
thank you so
voting needs
much.
to reflect that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Carl. This has been really informative.
I've
Thank you,
enjoyed
Mayor.
working with my colleagues today.
Thank you
Thank
very much. Good to see you again.
Thank you all. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Carl, and everyone. It's been so great to hear your perspectives of how your local leadership is working to advance climate resiliency in Southeast Florida. Thank you all to our audience for joining the discussion. Next, we are about to roll into our lunch break. There's still time to place your Uber order if you can access your coupon from your registration. That'll give you $10 off your lunch ordered for today. While you eat, we encourage you to click on the lunch break session to watch our screening of the film Hidden Wild starting at noon and running for about 30 minutes. Hidden Wild was co-produced by the Palm Beach County Environmental Resources Department and Discover the Palm Beaches. Hidden Wild tells the story of 3 local students as they follow an expedition leader and conservation photographer to witness the most scenic hidden landscapes in the Palm Beaches. Follow their expedition as they pedal, hike, and walk through the swamp, paddle down wild and scenic rivers, encounter an underwater world filled with life, and see panoramic vistas atop a historical lighthouse. And of course, they end with a trip to the beach. Before the film starts, you will see a few remarks from our sponsors. We hope you will enjoy the lunch and the film, and we will see you back at 12:45 with our next keynote session, Daniel Blackman with the EPA. We remain thrilled to have you all part of this discussion. And once again, thank you, mayors and commissioner, for joining us today.